This is Contra Radio Network, internet radio for the discerning prepper and patriot.
Hey folks, guess what the number one phrase that Life Change Tea receives by email? You ready? We love this tea! We love this tea! Time after time, week after week, we love this tea! Life Change Tea gives you more energy, a beautiful cleansing, and fulfills its slogan perfectly. The tea that makes you go. So if you want to be on your health game, log on to getthetea.com and order Life Change Super Strength Tea. Packages come in a 1-month supply, and when you brew this stuff, wait until you see the results. Aren't we all about the results? And with a lot of people's health struggling, we can use a little bit of help. Doctors will tell you disease starts in the gut. So log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Be our next email saying, I love this tea. I love this tea. Get the tea at getthetea.com. Helping America one tea bag at a time.
Life is unpredictable, but you can count on Valley Food Storage to help you and your family prepare. With clean, natural, great-tasting, and long-lasting food storage, with our natural and nutritious freeze-dried food, you'll be storing the food you love to eat. Log on to ContraRadioNetwork.com and click on the Valley Food Storage banner.
Welcome to the Jeffers Brief, only on Contra Radio Network.
Hello again, I'm John Jeffers here at the Jeffers Brief here on the Contra Radio Network. Welcome you to another exceptional episode of information that you can choose to do with what you will. Make your own decision. Oh yeah, listeners in Canada. I know you keep hearing me tell you it's coming. I just can't quite hook him to commit to doing a show for you Canadians up there. But I thank you for listening. Keep listening. Stay with me on this. Not going to do anything about coronavirus this episode. If you don't know about coronavirus by now, I can't help you. I can't. That, and of course, you'll get the conspiracy theories. Oh, it's a weapon. It's a weapon. Hold on. If that is a biological weapon, it is the worst biological weapon ever put out. It's only got a 2% mortality rate. Less than 3%. The flu has killed over 10,000 people this season in the United States alone. The SARS virus, which happened about 10 years ago or so, had a 10% mortality rate. SARS has less than 3. It's like 2.6. If that's a biological weapon, then it's the worst biological weapon ever put out. That's all I can tell you. I'm not so sure what, and another thing too, I don't care where it came from. The fact is, it's here. Got to deal with it. All right. What am I going to... what do we want to talk about? For you preppers out there, I got this for you. The digital bug out bag. SHTFblog.com. Thank you for the use thereof. I want to put it out there. I thought it was pretty good, and I liked it. So let's put it out there. And I think once you realize what it can do for you, it'll make more sense for you. So when you have a digital bug out bag, it makes sense to keep backup copies of important documents digitally. You should keep and make a USB drive with important documents like copies of IDs, immunizations, passports, anything. Here, let's put it this way. Any government piece of paper that has your name on it, whether it be like a passport or tax returns, you should have a copy of it anyways, put and stored away. Because then you can prove what you had, what you didn't have. And now remember that, because I'm going to come back to it at the end. And it'll make perfect sense for you. So you have to sort out stuff. You got to scan and organize all these documents. And if you have a family, it's going to take you a bit longer to do it because you got to scan their stuff too. Birth certificates, social security cards, all that crap. You got to do it, all right? However, if your computer crashes and you lose the documents because you have all that on the USB drive, guess what? You're good to go. You got it. For example, say you got pets. You got to have records of their shots, rabies shots, whatever else they need. And if you want to, you can take a step further. You can put family photos on there if you wanted to. Now, Jay Bridger wrote this, and I think it's pretty good. You should keep a copy away from your home, like in a safety deposit box, your place of employment, or a trusted friend or family member's place. You should keep a copy at your home for your own convenience, but if your house should be lost to a fire or natural disaster, you will be able to have your backup data. If you aren't able to scan items as PDFs, you could take photos with your phone and keep those. You could even email them to yourself and store them in a Google Drive for a quick backup. There is no reason you can't make paper copies. I just like how small the thumb drive is. I do too. The downside is it can be lost. Unless you protected your data somehow, it can't be accessed by whoever finds it. And I haven't been able to find something as simple as a password-protected USB drive. That doesn't mean it's not out there, it just means I haven't found it. I have found two simple and free options to secure data on the thumb drives. Those are BitLocker and VeraCrypt. Now, BitLocker is an encryption feature that's included with Microsoft Windows. It's very easy to use. Insert your flash drive, right-click, turn on BitLocker, print your backup key or store it somewhere safe. Think of a good secure password. Now when you insert your thumb drive, it will say access denied. You will have to enter your password to access the files in the drive. If you have a Windows machine, it should already be installed. The second solution is called VeraCrypt. This is the new version of the well-liked TrueCrypt program, and using it feels exactly the same. VeraCrypt is free, open-source encryption software. Pretty intuitive and easy to use. You can encrypt a partition of your drive or the entire thing. You can make a hidden drive, which is a partition within a partition that looks like random data. You can make a traveler or portable disk that has an executable file on it. That way, whatever computer you are using doesn't need to have VeraCrypt installed. It can just run off the executable on your flash drive. The downside is you must have administrator privileges on whatever computer that may be. There's a ton of information on the forums on the VeraCrypt website. Now, I can't speak to the quality of these encryption features because I don't know what they're talking about most of the time. I just don't have the background knowledge to understand what things like AES encryption algorithm with 256-bit key mean. I can tell you they both appear to be robust and well-liked among people much more educated in this area than I am. Now, does that mean the NSA or FBI can't get into it? Yeah, they probably could. And NSA, if you're listening, welcome to the show. Glad you're here, guys. Give me a call sometime. I would love to have you guys on the show. I got a lot of questions. Anyways. Yeah, I got a few more minutes here. The idea is to try to keep Joe Schmo on the street from stealing all your information if it should fall out of your pocket or gets lost or whatever. So, If you're technologically inept like me, the simplest way to protect your digital data may be good hiding spot or a robust safe. If your tablet or phone can read a micro SD card, storing your information here would make it accessible on the go. Plus, they're tiny and will fit nearly anywhere, even in a hollowed out spy coin. You should have the option to encrypt your SD card with your phone. You must keep your information updated in each document name. I include the day I scanned it, the expiration date. It makes for a long file name, but I can tell you at a glance when something needs to be replaced. For example, a driver's license could be named driver's license 3116, expires 3/2/2022. Consider keeping the drive with a spare credit card or cash in the event something awful happens, like losing your home. It'll help you get by the first few days, more likely. It'll save you from thumbing through a bunch of papers at one random thing you never thought you'd need. As a bonus, if you need to email something, it's already in PDF format, so you can fire it off ASAP. Now, I did say that I would come back around to this, and this is why. Back in the War of Northern Aggression, when Sherman was marching on the capital of Georgia, not Atlanta, I believe it was Milledgeville at the time, the Union soldiers got into all the tax records, and they destroyed every tax record. And they did it so that way farmers, plantation owners couldn't prove that they owned a particular plot of property or anything else. And of course, they didn't have USB drives back then or all that stuff. The reason being, you should have the USB drive with all your financial, personal information, etc., in case or identification that you need to do, you can prove what it is you're trying to prove. Can't prove it if a tornado comes, blows your house away, and it goes everywhere. You follow me? Okay. Stick with me for segment number 2, coming up right after this.
This is the Contra Radio Network, CRN for all the right reasons.
Black Metal Firearms are a couple guys I know personally and friends of mine that put together some great accessories for all your firearms needs. Everything that I've seen them do is just top-notch and very nice looking. BlackMetalFirearms.com. Check them out. I think you'll be glad you did. Go to Facebook, Black Metal Firearms. They got a great page there too. Learn more about the workmanship and the craftsmanship they put into every accessory and every build they do.
At Stag Arms, there is no weak side. Our rifles are 100% American made, including each and every part assembled. We aim to provide recreational shooters, law enforcement officers, hunters, and professional shooters with super quality and competitively priced rifles. Every rifle shipped is built to order. Check out Stag Arms now. Log on to ContraRadioNetwork.com and click on the Stag Arms banner.
Welcome back to segment 2. I'm John Jeffers here on the Jeffers Brief. Let us continue. But that's why you should always have your stuff either. I have mine in 2 places. I got it on a USB, and I also have it put in the cloud. 2 places. Redundancy. Redundancy works. If you're a prepper, you've heard the term 1 is none, 2 is 1. That's redundancy, guys. That's why you should have it. All right? Next. Let's something's gonna be coming up very shortly, and we're gonna need some time to. I'm gonna need some time to explain it to you in case you've never heard of it. It's called the Non Delegation Doctrine. Now, this is coming up. The progressives hate this. They hate it, which is why we should like it, to tell the truth. But basically, and you'll start to see a lot of this, especially in small towns. They do this. The mayor will delegate his authority to a village or city manager. And they do that so that way the politician can say, well, I didn't vote for that. I didn't back that. I didn't know about that. They put all the political risk on a non-elected person appointed or hired by the city or village to be the manager. Anyways, non-delegation of authority doctrine is this. You're going to be hearing a lot about it. The non-delegation doctrine is a principle in administrative law that Congress cannot delegate its legislative powers to other entities. For example, the EPA. They can't do that. Now, this prohibition typically involves Congress delegating its powers to administrative agencies or to private organizations. In J.W. Hampton versus the United States, if you're taking notes, this is the site, 276 U.S. 394, 1928. The Supreme Court clarified that when Congress does give an agency the ability to regulate, Congress must give the agencies an intelligible principle on which to base the regulations. This standard is viewed as quite lenient and has rarely, if ever, been used to strike down legislation. Get your pencils out. Here we go, new site for you. In ALA Schechter Poultry Corporation versus United States, 295 U.S. 495, 1935. Excuse me. The Supreme Court held that Congress is not permitted to abdicate or to transfer to others the essential legislative functions with which it has thus vested. That's the Congress. The Constitution says only Congress can pass laws. So when you hear about, let's say the EPA, and they're out there enforcing their rules and regulations, they're doing so with the authority of the federal government, which makes it laws. It's a law by any other name. And they can't do that. Only Congress, by virtue of the Constitution, can actually pass laws. Don't believe me? Pick up one of these. Heritage Foundation, to give them out for free. Copy of the Constitution. Only the Congress can pass laws. And they can't give it to the EPA or anyone else. Only they can. But this non-delegation authority that they think they have, this delegation authority they think they have, will allow, they go out and allows them to make all the bad choices and act within the force of government under the force of law. Can't do that. If you can call it a rule, you can call it a regulation. However, it's still being enforced with the full authority of the federal government, even though the Congress did not pass a law for it. This is why we have such a huge bureaucracy. This is your swamp. This is your deep state. They hate the idea that this could be coming back up to the Supreme Court very shortly. All right? That's what non-delegation doctrine is. You're going to start hearing more about it. Right now, not all, I don't want to say all, in many of the progressive, socialist, liberal rags that are out there, they're talking about this, and because it could come down. Now, according to the slate, and I don't buy very much into it. But the article is very good about it, and it states pretty much what you're going to hear. Now, it says the Supreme Court may revive a legal theory that was last used to strike down the New Deal laws of FDR. who, by the way, was, talk about abuse of power. Good Lord. The stuff he pulled and got away with was unbelievable. Well, when was this written? March 5th, 2018. So this decision is called Gundy versus the United States. And it's not about defending child predators. It isn't. Don't think that it is. But the non-delegation theory came up in this particular case. So it's a constitutional challenge to the federal sex offender regulations. And if like me, you believe that America's current sex offender regime is draconian, unjust, and counterproductive, that might sound like good news. First of all, I don't have a problem. Remember, this is an article. Who wrote this? So I can give credit. Mark Joseph Stern wrote this. Remember, this is from the Slate. This is a liberal rag. Personally, I don't mind sex offender registrations. There are some cases that I didn't particularly think it should have been used, but regardless. Now, there's one aspect of the court's grant on Gundy versus the United States that may be very bad news from the progressive viewpoint. It will only consider whether the policy in question violates the non-delegation doctrine. It's a hazy legal principle last used to strike down New Deal legislation in 1935. The law in question, the Sex Offender Registration Notification Act, known as SORNA, required states to expand their sex offender registries or lose millions in federal funding. It also increased punishments for sex offenders, keeping them in the registry for decades, strictly limiting their freedom of movement and allowing them to be detained for years in civil commitment after they finish serving their prison sentences. All right, if you're like me, and you've been dealing with sex offenders before, most sex offenders' moral compass is broken. They cannot be fixed. They cannot be rehabilitated. Period. They will reoffend again. So, to get back to it, what? Oh, I don't care. Sometimes I get these messages on the computer when I'm doing the show, and it's like, what? I don't care. All right, but anyways. Oddly, Congress did not clarify whether SORNA must apply to sex offenders convicted before the law's passage. Instead, it gave the Attorney General authority to apply the law retroactively, which he did. Typically, the Constitution's ex post facto clause prohibits the government from applying new criminal law retroactively to punish an offender who committed his crimes before the law's passage. But in 2003, the Supreme Court rejected an ex post facto challenge to Alaska's retroactive Sex Offender Registration Act, holding that Alaska's measure was not sufficiently punitive to violate the clause. Thus, Herman Gundy, the defendant in this case, who was convicted of a sex offense before SORNA's passage, decided to challenge the federal laws retroactively under the non-delegation doctrine. Now, under this theory, Congress infringes upon the constitutional separation of powers when it delegates too much legislative authority to another branch of government, which they cannot do. Congress can't delegate its authority to the executive branch or the judicial branch. Judicial can't do it to the executive or the legislative branch. Executive can't do it to the judicial or the legislative branch. That's what they're talking about here. Now here, Gundy asserts that Congress delegated an unconstitutional amount of power to the Attorney General by allowing him to determine how to apply SORNA retroactively. That sounds like Congress, once again, dodging the bullet, don't want to take responsibility. Now, on one hand, SORNA is a truly terrible law, and I'd like to see it reined in. On the other hand, Gundy may open up a nasty can of worms. The Supreme Court has deployed the non-delegation doctrine to strike down legislation precisely twice in 1935. Both laws were New Deal regulations, one governing industrial labor laws, the other setting quotas on oil sales. But shortly thereafter, the court changed its attitude toward the New Deal. giving up efforts to police economic reforms. Since then, the court has largely abandoned the non-delegation theory, allowing Congress to delegate power to another branch so long as that power is limited by some intelligible principle. Justice Anthony Kennedy described the doctrine as somewhat moribund during oral arguments in 2014. Now, you're probably thinking, so what is it that Congress, how are they able, is it limited? What is the intelligible principle? The intelligible principle is congressional oversight. That's what it's titled. That's what it is. Now, in recent years, however, several consecutive justices have expressed an interest in reviving non-delegation principles. Justice Clarence Thomas wants to bring it back. So does Justice Neil Gorsuch, who praised the doctrine as a safeguard of personal freedom while on the 10th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. He also endorsed it in 2017 speech to the Federalist Society. Many progressives fear that once resuscitated, the theory could be used to strike down all manner of economic regulations. Now, these days, Congress's hands-off, mostly regulatory authority to a slew of federal agencies situated in the executive branch. A court concerned about the non-delegation could strike down a vast range of liberal legislation under the doctrine. Labor laws and environmental protections would be especially vulnerable, since Congress gives agencies a broad mandate to interpret and implement these measures. If the Supreme Court renders that mandate unconstitutional, federal rules that protect workers' rights, collective bargaining, clean air, and endangered species would fall. This is his supposition, not that it would. So, should progressive panic about Gundy? The University of North Carolina criminal law professor Carissa Byrne-Hessick points out the Supreme Court could set different rules for the non-delegation in the criminal context. Gorsuch suggested as much in his 10th Circuit opinion, which in fact involved a similar challenge to SORNA's retroactivity. In an impressive dissent, Gorsuch wrote that Congress must provide something more than intelligible principle when delegating prosecutorial authority given the individual liberty at stake. If the separation of powers means anything, he asserted, it means that the prosecutor isn't allowed to define the crimes he gets to enforce. Makes sense to me. All right, we'll be right back. We'll finish this up because this is important stuff.
Times are changing. The circus of politics, healthcare's low standards and high prices, and let's not forget food quality. What to do? Arm yourself with Life Change Tea at GetTheTea.com. In a world of chemical imbalance and poor air and water quality, it's time you make a move. Log on to GetTheTea.com and stock up on organic non-GMO supplements. Don't forget the tea. Cleansing your body never felt so good. And we have a brand new tea called Takedown Tea, which helps support healthy glucose. All natural body support so you can be at your best, naturally. All you have to do is log on to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. We're not a fad that comes and goes. We are the real deal. Join us and armor up. GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Changing America's health one tea bag at a time.
This is Contra Radio Network, internet radio for the discerning prepper and patriot.
Life is unpredictable, but you can count on Valley Food Storage to help you and your family prepare. With clean, natural, great tasting, and long-lasting food storage. With our natural and nutritious freeze-dried food, you'll be storing the food you love to eat. Log on to ContraRadioNetwork.com and click on the Valley Food Storage banner.
we're back at it again on non-delegation theory. Now, Gorsuch is probably right, but I worry about this court's ability or willingness to limit the non-delegation doctrine's revival to criminal cases. Gorsuch has a knack of reintroducing conservative principles in cases where they lead to a liberal outcome, even though the underlying rationale tilts the law rightward. Would this conservative Supreme Court cabin non-delegation to criminal law, or might it succumb to the temptation to use this principle as a sword to slay economic and environmental regulations too? Gundy will give us a glimpse of the answer. So, now we have to figure out if I believe that the conservative judges on SCOTUS had, was it 4? They lost 5-4. And I believe Kagan wrote the opinion for Gundy. And she struck it down, the non-delegation. However, if President Trump gets another Supreme Court pick, that's why he has to be reelected, gets one more Supreme Court pick on the board, on the SCOTUS, they'll have it. Do I believe in the non-delegation theory? Yes, I do. No elected official should have the right to shirk their responsibility and put it off on another government agency full of bureaucrats who are unelected to make laws. I'm sorry, to make rules and regulations. Yeah. Something I want you to think about this. Now, there's something else that's coming up too, and I'm sure you've already heard about it. This is from the Conservative Treehouse, Sundance. Judicial shenanigans. Stone judge will deliver sentence and then immediately postpone the execution of the sentence. Well, so much for your speedy trial demand. Now, this is as sketchy as it gets. The notorious activist D.C. Judge Amy Berman Jackson announced today she will deliver the sentence for Roger Stone on Thursday. However, she will immediately postpone execution of that sentence until the issues around the request for a new trial are resolved. Here's what appears to be happening. Judge Amy Berman Jackson doesn't want to deal with, doesn't want the optics of, the serious issues surrounding the activist jury foreperson Tomika Hart prior to delivering her sentence. Within the process to deal with Stone's motion for a new trial, Berman Jackson knows the petition would involve bringing in Tomika Hart to her courtroom for questioning. The judge doesn't want that damaging political optic prior to delivering her sentence. Obviously, such an appearance begs the question of how poorly Judge Berman Jackson handled jury selection. This is a serious case of CYA, covering your ass, and it's a sketchy decision. Now, Judge Berman Jackson will pass her sentence on Stone and then take up the issue of a new trial after the sentence is announced. As a consequence, the judge will not carry out execution of the sentence until the Tomika Hart issues are addressed. That, my friends, is FUBAR. In a 12-minute conference call with the defense and prosecution teams on Tuesday, Judge Jackson said she will stand down. She will still hand down Stone's sentence at Thursday's hearing, but indicated she plans to defer the execution of the sentence until the court addresses Stone's request for a new trial. Prosecutors told Jackson they were in favor of moving forward with Thursday's sentencing as planned. But Seth Ginsburg, a lawyer for Stone, argued they should hold off until the motions before the court are fully addressed. This issue goes to the heart of the case, Ginsburg said. It should be resolved before any further proceedings are had. Now, two newly assigned prosecutors on the case, John Crabb Jr. and J.P. Cooney, made their debuts on behalf of the government on Tuesday. And what is J.P. Cooney's most recent claim to public fame? I'll tell you. It's Andrew McCabe. In a letter written to Michael Bromwich and David Schertler, the defense counsel for Andrew McCabe, on February 14th, 2020, J.P. Cooney writes, "Dear counsel, we write to inform you that after careful consideration, the government has decided not to pursue criminal charges against your client." Yeah, that's the guy. That's the guy. What kind of nonsense is this? I'll let you decide. It's that bad. It's that effing bad. Plus, let's put it this way. Our good Judge Berman Jackson, how did she manage to get the Stone case, the Manafort case, put in front of her? I don't know. I don't know what happened. It's random. There's an earthquake, volcano. I don't know. But it did. Yes, the deep state does have a way of making sure it gets the right judges in the right cases, doesn't it? Meanwhile, the WAPO report that Attorney General Bill Barr threatens to quit. No. This is from Sundance also. First, the report comes from the pathetic Beltway crowd of journalistic narrative engineers. So there's likely little to no substance to the construct. However, that said, if Bill Barr is so weak, pathetic, and incapable of doing his job that he needs to threaten to resign if President Trump tweets his opinion, then Barr is in the wrong profession. Unless, of course, President Trump's pressure on Bill Barr is actually forcing the Attorney General to do something the AG is predisposed not to undertake, which, given the background history of Bill Barr, is also entirely possible. So right around this moment in time is where a multitude of mutually aligned Beltway quizzling pundits will declare that Bill Barr's delicate sensibilities are being wounded by a president who demands forceful accountability. For example, traditional D.C. Republican pundits, insert Laura Ingraham and Max Boot here. The bottom line is President Trump is doing absolutely nothing to impede Bill Barr from doing his job, if the U.S. Attorney General is factually intent on doing that job. Well, is he? I don't know. I don't have the answers for this. But it is interesting, to say the least. Ever since he assumed the office of Attorney General, has been praising the likes of Rod Rosenstein, Robert Mueller, and Chris Wray. Given the nature of what is widely available in review, that level of logical discontent is not representative of an individual who possesses reasonable judgment in the quest for deliberate justice. Just saying. So until Bill Barr actually mans up and does something with the authority he has requested, the image of Bondo Barr attempting to cover up the rot and wrongdoing while surrounded by visible and overwhelming corruption and pontificating about constitutional norms is a more apt descriptive, would you think? President Trump has been victimized by the same institutions Bill Barr is now in charge of. So, forgive me if I don't impart sympathy upon a person who's in charge of those institutions, whining about background noise, and seemingly incapable of addressing the abuse unless all the planets are aligned to provide him the quiet atmosphere he requires while thumbing through the final chapters of his indulgent memoirs over a glass of Chardonnay. Suck it up, cupcake. When you get all done with that, there's still a job to do. The problem facing Bill Barr is his own inability to deal with the issues within his own authority. It was not President Trump that caused 4 underlings to defy Barr's authority and set up the Attorney General with the image of a rogue DOJ lacking leadership and direction. That issue was a direct result of Barr's own inability to cut out political corruption on his first days, weeks, months, and years as head of the agency. No doubt several Bush Republicans will stand quickly in defense of the psychologically wounded soldier sitting in the tent crying, he just can't take the sound of the thunder any longer. And yes, President Trump is likely to be Patton-esque in removing his helmet and slapping the feeble-minded fool and demanding he get back in the fight. After all. President Trump says, yeah, I do make his job harder. I do agree with that. I think that's true. He's a very straight shooter. We have a great attorney general, and he's working very hard. And he's working against a lot of people that don't want to see good things happen, in my opinion. That's my opinion, not his opinion. That's my opinion. We'll have to ask what his opinion is, but I will say this. Social media for me has been very important because it gives me a voice, because I don't get that voice in the press, in the media. I don't get that voice, so I'm allowed to have a voice. Now go make me a sandwich and tell the Attorney General to bring me a Diet Coke. Hey, we'll be right back for our fourth and final segment. Don't go away.
Proper has made tactical gear with a purpose for over 50 years, since their first U.S. Navy contract in 1967. Today, Proper designs and manufactures professional-level tactical apparel and gear for military, law enforcement, and public safety professionals and civilians, whether in the service, on the job, or off for the weekend. Log on to ContraRadioNetwork.com and click on the Proper banner now.
Black Metal Firearms are a couple guys I know personally and friends of mine that put together some great accessories for all your firearms needs. Everything that I've seen them do is just top-notch and very nice looking. BlackMetalFirearms.com. Check them out. I think you'll be glad you did. Go to Facebook, Black Metal Firearms. They got a great page there too. Learn more about the workmanship and the craftsmanship they put into every accessory and every build they do.
Fourth and final segment of this week's show. So maybe some of you didn't catch it, but we have Tucker Carlson who discusses Bernie Sanders versus Michael Bloomberg. And last night he was talking about how he correctly narrows the Democrat field that's eventually going to come down to Breadline Bernie Sanders and Michael I Love Authority Bloomberg. During a Carlson monologue, he outlines and eviscerates how Bloomberg is doing something never before seen in U.S. electoral politics. Bloomberg's strategy is to simply overwhelm the competition with cash and purchase the nomination from a DNC club that supports his never Breadline Bernie efforts. That's right. I called him Breadline Bernie, and so should you. Damn communist. So, I wouldn't have any more respect than I have for him now if you just come out and just admit it. But anyways, here, listen for yourself.
Good evening and welcome to a special edition of Tucker Carlson Tonight. According to new numbers over the weekend, the Democratic primary race is constricting to become really a two-man contest. A lot of people still in the race, but the outline of the future is getting clearer. So on one side, you have a candidate, Bernie Sanders, who wants to turn this country into a comprehensive welfare state. He plans to upend every aspect of American life in order to impose a new economic order. Now, Sanders isn't hiding what he plans to do. He's running on what he plans to do. His main rival is Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York. Bloomberg has shot to above 15% nationally in the polls, from nowhere, essentially. He's suddenly leading the race in the critical Super Tuesday state of Florida. So what is Mike Bloomberg running on? That's a trick question, actually. Bloomberg isn't running on anything. Not because he doesn't have ideas. He's got plenty of ideas, and some of them are far outside the American mainstream. But Bloomberg doesn't think any of that matters. He's not running on ideas. He's not trying to convince voters of anything. He's not making arguments or working to change their minds on policies they care about. He's trying to buy them, and hence the presidency. It's the single most cynical political campaign ever run in this country. Bloomberg is trying to subvert our democracy with cash, and he's going all in to do it. According to the latest numbers, Bloomberg has spent more than $417 million on advertising so far in this race. His nearest rival, Bernie Sanders, has spent $40 million. That's less than a tenth. Joe Biden, the man they told us was the front.
Hold on a minute. Something you need to understand. When they buy these ads, they go through a middleman. The commission for the middleman is usually 10 to 15% for the buying of the commercial for the ad. Just putting it out there so you get an idea who's making a crap load of money on this.
Frontrunner has spent just $12.3 million. Compare that, let's say it again, to the at least $417 million Bloomberg has pumped into the race just on advertising. And that's just the beginning. Aides say Bloomberg is willing to spend $2 billion of his own money by Election Day, and the number could go higher. Nothing like this has ever happened in America. Bloomberg's spending is like, and pick your metaphor here, a tsunami breaking over our political system. When the waters recede, there's nothing left. It's been flattened and wiped clean by the weight of Mike Bloomberg's wealth. Bloomberg is the tallest figure on the landscape, the only one left upright. That's his plan. He's all but admitted that's his plan. Watch him here disavow stop and frisk, the single most successful policy he had as mayor of New York.
I defended it, looking back, for too long, because I didn't understand then the unintended pain it was causing to young black and brown families and their kids. I heard their pain, their confusion, and their anger, and I've learned from them, and I've grown from them.
So think about what you just saw. It's not the normal pandering. Mike Bloomberg believes passionately in gun control. It's his life's mission. It's his signature issue. Stop and frisk may have been the most effective gun control policy ever administered anywhere. It took thousands of illegal firearms off the streets of New York. But Democratic primary voters have decided they don't like it. They're against stop and frisk. So without even pausing, Bloomberg grovels, as you just saw, and attacks his own legacy. Why did he do that? Because he doesn't care. Whatever. They're only words. He'll do whatever it takes. Now, they say politicians are ethically flexible, and of course they are. But this is different. There's something ominous about it. Bloomberg can seamlessly change his core beliefs because he doesn't think his beliefs are relevant to the outcome of this race. Only his wealth matters. And the horrifying fact is he may be right. How wealthy is Michael Bloomberg? Well, for context, the richest of the fabled Russian oligarchs, Leonid Mikhelson, is worth about $24 billion. Michael Bloomberg could literally give away twice that amount, or spend it on a presidential race if he wanted, and still be 5 times as rich as Donald Trump is. It's hard to imagine just how much money that is. But with that money, Bloomberg can suffocate all opposition and seize power. A ruling class which worships money above all sees nothing wrong with this. They're eager to help Bloomberg do it. Like Bloomberg, they're religiously libertarian on economic matters. That's a position that's shared by only a tiny percentage of the population. No normal person in this country thinks the widening wealth gap is a good thing. It's so obviously making America unstable. But Mike Bloomberg has been one of its chief beneficiaries. He will defend the current system above all else. There's a reason he's the favorite of finance moguls and tech commissars. Again, this is a total departure from anything we have seen before in the history of this country. Say what you will about Donald Trump, but in 2016, he ran for president on ideas that large numbers of voters actually liked, whether or not they liked him. Secure the border, end counterproductive wars, fight the fascism of political correctness. In selling those ideas, he spent about half what Hillary Clinton spent. But Bloomberg can't be bothered with selling ideas or with a platform. He doesn't care what the public thinks. That's why. He believes he can win by overwhelming voters with his money. This is the nightmare scenario that campaign finance reform activists used to tell us about. And they were right about one thing. Our system has been vulnerable to people like Michael Bloomberg for a long time. He's just the first one who's actually tried to do it. You should be alarmed by his campaign for president. Democracy doesn't break when voters choose unwisely. They sometimes do. Democracy collapses when what voters want becomes irrelevant.
There you go. And I think that's true. All right. Next. PJ Media is reporting that South Bend residents have a message for America. Don't elect Pete Buttigieg. Rick Moran's reporting for PJ Media on this. Now, if you don't know about South Bend, Indiana, it's a grimy industrial city of 100,000 people located on the St. Joseph River. It's known for being the home of Notre Dame University, which isn't really true since Notre Dame is technically located in Notre Dame, Indiana. But South Bend, whose second claim to fame is the Studebaker National Museum downtown, is the home of Democratic presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg. The highly ambitious Buttigieg is seeking the presidency despite serving 2 terms as mayor of a small city, a job that most would see as entry-level employment in politics as a stepping stone to the presidency, perhaps. That's sort of like burger flipping, applying for the CEO position at McDonald's, right? There are many South Bend residents who wonder about that too. But according to the New York Post, when residents of the city's impoverished west side reflect on Buttigieg's 2 terms as mayor, a few things come to mind. A spike in violent crime, development that largely ignored the African American community, and how their only well-lit street is the one that leads to Notre Dame University. So how, they wonder, can Buttigieg possibly be trusted to run the country? If he's the next president, I fear for our country. He couldn't run our city. How can he run the United States, said Michelle Berger, 42, a stay-at-home mom who lives in South Bend's impoverished and predominantly black west side. Much has been made of Mayor Pete's trouble with people of color. There appears to be something to the criticism as economic development during Buttigieg's tenure in office seems to have been lagging in the black community. Another West Side resident, Cornish Miller, 62, said the Buttigieg, rating him 1 to 10, I'd give him a 2. A 2. Buttigieg talked about all the improvements he made, but he hardly made a dent, said Miller, who works for a military supply company. The West Side is the most neglected part of town. The street I live on is the only street around here that has lights. That's because we're a gateway to Notre Dame. Young, articulate, attractive, and gay. Is that why Democrats are taking this guy seriously? To go for being a mayor with a city with a $350 million budget to running a country with a $5 trillion budget would seem to be a leap too far. But he's a Democrat and he's gay, so he's got that going for him. Taking credit for the work of others is part of politics, but Buttigieg appears to have taken the concept a bit too far. But Indiana Republican Party Chairman Kyle Hupford countered that what Buttigieg certainly had a few economic development wins, he actually had little, if anything, to do with that. I found it ironic that when he announced his presidential run, he did it in front of the Studebaker Building 84, which had sat vacant since 1963, Hupford said. But it was $3.5 million from then Governor Mike Pence's Regional Cities Initiative that made that project go. Humphreys said increased employment in the area covering South Bend, where the unemployment rate dropped from 9.3% in 2012 to 3.6% in 2018, was largely a function of statewide economic strength under Republican leadership. Rush Limbaugh had the temerity to point out that Buttigieg's election to the presidency would be extremely difficult due to his homosexuality. We can bemoan the unfairness of it, criticize those who won't vote for him because he's gay, and make fun of those with religious objections to his lifestyle. But you cannot deny the reality that Pete Buttigieg will lose a presidential contest against Donald Trump because he's gay. And South Bender residents say we should breathe a sigh of relief because of it. Again, that was Rick Moran at PJ Media. That's his article. That's what he's saying. All right, my friends, thanks for listening. I'm John Jeffers saying thank you for listening to the Jeffers Brief. Remember, we're looking for people. If you want to do a podcast, a show here on Contra Radio Network, Get a hold of me, John Jeffers at ContraRadioNetwork.com. John Jeffers at ContraRadioNetwork.com. I'll see you next week. Have a good one. Until then, be safe, be vigilant, and be alert.